Three identical brothers stand at the barn door, blocking Eli's only escape. Cain steps forward, his voice low and commanding. "You can run back to those men who threatened you, or you can stay here with us. Choose." Eli's hands tremble. He knows choosing them means surrendering everything. Before we dive in, comment where in the world you are watching from, and don't forget to click subscribe. The sun beat down mercilessly on the dusty road leading to the Blackwood Ranch. Eli Morgan wiped sweat from his brow and squinted at the weathered sign hanging crooked on the fence post. He had traveled 3 days from town with nothing but a letter of introduction and desperate hope. At 19, he had never worked a ranch before, never even been this far from civilization, but his options had run out, and the Blackwood brothers needed help. That was all that mattered. The ranch sprawled before him, larger than anything he had imagined. Corrals stretched in every direction, cattle dotting the brown grass like scattered stones. And there, standing in front of the main barn, were 3 men who made Eli's breath catch in his throat. They were identical. Triplets. Tall and broad-shouldered, with sun-darkened skin and eyes that tracked his approach like wolves watching prey. Each wore similar dusty work clothes, but there was something distinctly different about how each one carried himself. The one in the center stood with arms crossed, radiating authority. The one on the left leaned against the barn door with casual confidence. The one on the right stood perfectly still, watching with an intensity that made Eli's skin prickle. Eli forced himself to keep walking, even as his heart hammered against his ribs. He had known the Blackwood brothers had a reputation. Everyone in 3 counties knew about them, but no one had mentioned they were triplets, and no one had warned him about the way they would look at him when he finally arrived. "You must be Morgan," the one in the center said, his voice deep and commanding. "I'm Cain Blackwood. These are my brothers, Wyatt and Cole." Wyatt, the one leaning against the barn, gave a lazy smile that made Eli's stomach flip. Cole, the still one, said nothing, but his eyes traveled slowly down Eli's body and back up again. A deliberate assessment that left Eli feeling stripped bare. "Yes, sir," Eli managed, his voice embarrassingly shaky. "Eli Morgan, I got your letter about the position." "Ranch hand," Cain said flatly. "Long hours, hard work, and we don't tolerate laziness or incompetence." "I'm a fast learner, sir." "You ever worked cattle before?" Wyatt asked, his drawl easy but his eyes sharp. "No, sir." "Horses?" "Not really." "Hay baling? Fence repair? Branding?" Cole's voice was quieter than his brother's but somehow more dangerous. Eli swallowed hard. "No, sir, but I'm willing to do whatever needs doing. I won't quit." The 3 brothers exchanged looks, some silent communication passing between them. Eli felt the weight of their judgment, felt himself being measured and found wanting. He should have lied, should have claimed experience he didn't have. Now they would send him away, and he would have nowhere left to go. "You're honest at least," Cain said finally. "Most men would have lied their way into the job." "Lying would only hurt me in the end," Eli replied. "I'd rather earn my place than steal it." Another weighted silence. Then Wyatt pushed off the barn door and circled around Eli slowly, like a predator sizing up prey. "He's young, soft, city hands, not a callus on them." "We can fix that," Cole said, his eyes never leaving Eli's face. "Question is whether he can handle the fixing." Eli's mouth went dry. There was something in the way they spoke, the way they looked at him, that made his pulse race with something that wasn't quite fear. It was darker, more complicated, tinged with an awareness that made his skin feel too tight. "I can handle it," Eli said, forcing his voice steady. "Whatever you need from me." Cain stepped closer, close enough that Eli could smell leather and sweat and something earthier. "Careful making promises you might regret, boy. We work our hands hard here, real hard. Some can't take it." "I'm not some," Eli said, meeting his gaze despite the trembling in his legs. "Try me." Wyatt laughed, a low sound that sent shivers down Eli's spine. "Oh, I like him. He's got spine, even if he doesn't have experience." "Spine won't help him muck out stalls or break horses," Cole pointed out, but there was something in his tone that suggested he was talking about more than ranch work. "Then we'll teach him," Cain decided. "Starting now. "Wyatt, show him the barn. Cole, get him settled in the bunkhouse. We'll see if he survives his first day before we worry about anything else." It was a dismissal, but also a challenge. Eli nodded, following Wyatt toward the massive barn, while feeling Cole's presence at his back and Kane's eyes burning into him from behind. The barn was dim and cool after the blazing sun, smelling of hay and horses and old wood. Wyatt led him deeper inside, past rows of stalls where horses watched with dark, curious eyes. "You really never worked a ranch before?" Wyatt asked, his voice echoing in the vast space. "No, sir. I worked in a store in town. Before that, I was in school." "School," Wyatt repeated, like it was a foreign concept. "What's a schoolboy doing out here looking for ranch work?" Eli hesitated. The truth was complicated and painful, but Wyatt was watching him with those sharp eyes, waiting. "My father died, left debts. I couldn't pay them working in town, so I came looking for something that paid better." "And you thought ranch work was the answer?" There was amusement in Wyatt's tone, but also something softer, almost sympathy. "I thought it was my only answer." Wyatt stopped walking and turned to face him. In the dim light of the barn, his features were shadowed, making him look almost dangerous. "Ranch work will break you if you're not careful. It's not just the labor, though that's hard enough. It's the isolation, the loneliness, the way this place gets into your head and changes you." "I'm already broken," Eli said quietly. "Can't get much worse." Something flickered in Wyatt's eyes. He reached out and his rough hand caught Eli's, turning it over to examine his unmarked palm. "These will blister and bleed within a week. You'll be so sore you can barely move. Your body will scream at you to quit." Eli's breath caught at the touch, at the warmth of Wyatt's calloused fingers against his skin. "And if I don't quit, then you'll be remade into something harder, stronger." Wyatt's thumb traced the line of Eli's palm, a gesture that felt far too intimate for a simple examination. "Question is, are you ready to be unmade first?" Eli couldn't answer. His voice had abandoned him, trapped somewhere in his chest along with the air that seemed too thick to breathe. Wyatt was too close, his presence overwhelming in the confined space between the stalls. "Come on," Wyatt said, releasing Eli's hand and stepping back. "Let's get you started before Kane decides you're more trouble than you're worth." The first task was mucking out stalls. Wyatt handed Eli a shovel and pointed to the nearest stall. "Clear it completely, spread fresh hay, refill the water, then move to the next one. There are 20 stalls total." Eli stared at the shovel, then at the stall piled high with soiled bedding. "All of them?" "All of them, before sunset." Wyatt's smile was wicked. "Better get started." By the third stall, Eli's hands were already blistering. By the sixth, his back screamed in protest with every movement. By the 10th, he was dizzy with exhaustion and heat, sweat soaking through his shirt despite the barn's shade. He didn't realize Cole had been watching until a water canteen appeared in front of his face. "Drink. You're no good to us if you collapse." Eli took the canteen with shaking hands and drank deeply. The water was cool and sweet, and he nearly moaned with relief. When he lowered it, Cole was standing close, too close, watching him with that same intense focus from earlier. "You're struggling," Cole observed. "I'll finish," Eli insisted. "I didn't say you wouldn't, but you're doing it wrong." Cole moved behind him, and suddenly his larger body pressed against Eli's back, his hands covering Eli's on the shovel handle. "Like this. Use your legs, not just your back. Let the weight do the work." Eli couldn't think, couldn't breathe. Cole's chest was solid against his spine, his arms bracketing Eli's body, his breath warm against Eli's ear as he demonstrated the proper technique. It was instructional, practical, but it felt like something else entirely, something that made Eli's pulse race and his skin burn. "Feel the difference?" Cole murmured, and the low rumble of his voice vibrated through Eli's back. "Yes," Eli managed, though he wasn't sure what he was agreeing to anymore. Cole held the position for another moment, then stepped back, leaving Eli cold despite the summer heat. "Finish the stalls, then find Kane. He has your next assignment." He disappeared before Eli could respond, leaving only the lingering warmth of his touch and the echo of his voice. Eli stood there, gripping the shovel, trying to calm his racing heart and ignore the way his body had responded to Cole's proximity. This was going to be harder than he had imagined, and not because of the work. By the time Eli finished the stalls, the sun was setting, and every muscle in his body screamed in protest. His hands were raw and bleeding, his shirt soaked through with sweat, and he was fairly certain he might collapse if he had to take another step. But he had finished. All 20 stalls, clean and fresh, exactly as instructed. Kane was waiting for him outside the barn, leaning against the fence with his arms crossed. In the golden light of sunset, he looked carved from stone, immovable and eternal. "Done?" Kane asked. "Yes, sir." Kane pushed off the fence and walked toward him slowly, his eyes traveling over Eli's exhausted form. "Show me your hands." Eli held them out, palms up, revealing the angry blisters and torn skin. Kane took them carefully, his touch surprisingly gentle as he examined the damage. "You should have asked for gloves. Didn't want to seem weak." "Pride is stupidity out here," Kane said, but his tone lacked real anger. "Come on, you need those treated before infection sets in." He led Eli toward the main house, a large structure that dominated the ranch's center. Inside was cooler, with thick adobe walls and high ceilings. Kane took him to a washroom and gestured to a basin. "Clean them first. Water's there." Eli plunged his hands into the water and bit back a cry as it stung the raw flesh. Kane watched, his expression unreadable, then retrieved a tin of salve from a shelf. "This will hurt," Kane warned, then proceeded to spread the salve across Eli's damaged palms with firm, methodical movements. It did hurt, but Eli refused to make a sound. He kept his eyes fixed on Kane's face, watching the concentration there. The way his jaw tightened slightly as he worked. Up close, Kane was even more striking than from a distance. Strong features, eyes the color of dark honey, a mouth that looked like it rarely smiled, but would be devastating if it did. "Why do you keep staring at me?" Kane asked without looking up. Eli flushed. "Sorry, I didn't mean to be rude." "I didn't say it was rude. I asked why." Eli scrambled for an answer that wasn't the truth. "You look like your brothers, but you're different somehow. I'm trying to figure out how." "We're triplets. We're supposed to look alike. But you move differently, stand differently. Wyatt is relaxed, Cole is still, and you're—" Eli stopped, realizing he was about to overstep. "I'm—" "What?" Kane's eyes lifted to his, pinning him in place. "Coiled," Eli said quietly, "like you're always ready for something to go wrong." Kane's hands stilled on his. For a long moment, he just stared at Eli, with an intensity that made it hard to breathe. Then he resumed wrapping Eli's hands in clean bandages, his movements slightly less gentle than before. "You're perceptive for a city boy," Kane said finally. "That might be a problem." "Why?" "Because out here, some things are better left unnoticed." The words hung between them like a warning. Kane finished the bandages and stepped back, putting distance between them. "Wyatt will show you to your bunk. We start before dawn tomorrow. Don't be late." It was a dismissal, but Eli found himself reluctant to leave. There was something magnetic about Kane, something that pulled despite the obvious danger of getting too close. "Thank you," Eli said, "for the medicine." "Don't thank me. Just prove you were worth the effort." Eli nodded and turned to leave, but Kane's voice stopped him at the door. "Eli." He turned back. Kane stood silhouetted against the window, the dying light making him look almost ethereal. "You did well today. Better than expected." A pause. "But tomorrow will be harder. They all will be, until this place either makes you or breaks you." "Which one are you hoping for?" Eli asked, surprising himself with his boldness. Kane's lips curved into the barest hint of a smile, and it transformed his face completely. "I haven't decided yet." The bunkhouse was small but clean, with 6 beds lined against the walls. Only 3 were occupied, the other ranch hands already asleep and snoring. Wyatt was waiting inside, sitting on one of the empty beds with a plate of food. "Figured you'd be hungry," Wyatt said, holding out the plate. "Kane forgets people need to eat when he's focused on work." Eli took the plate gratefully and sat on the opposite bed, too tired to care about manners as he devoured the simple meal of beans and cornbread. Wyatt watched him with amusement. "You look like you're about to fall over." "Feel like it too," Eli admitted between bites. "And yet you finished all 20 stalls." Impressive for someone who's never held a shovel before? I said I wouldn't quit. Most men say that. Few actually mean it. Wyatt leaned back against the wall, his eyes thoughtful. You're different than the usual hands we get out here. How so? Younger, softer, more honest. Wyatt's gaze traveled over him slowly, deliberately. More interesting. Eli's throat went dry. There was something in Wyatt's tone, in the way he looked at him, that made the words feel like more than casual observation. I'm just trying to earn my keep. Oh, I think you'll earn more than that before this is over. The words hung heavy with implication. Eli set down his empty plate with shaking hands, suddenly very aware that they were alone in the bunkhouse, that the other hands were deeply asleep, that Wyatt was watching him like a man who saw something he wanted. I should sleep, Eli said, his voice barely above a whisper. Early start tomorrow. You should, Wyatt agreed, but he didn't move. But you're afraid to, aren't you? Afraid of what? Of what you'll dream about, of who? Wyatt's smile was knowing and dangerous. We all felt it today, Eli. That pull, that curiosity. You felt it too, didn't you? With each of us. Eli's heart slammed against his ribs. He wanted to deny it, to claim confusion or exhaustion. But Wyatt's eyes were too knowing, and the truth sat too heavy in his chest to hide. I don't know what you're talking about. Eli tried anyway. Wyatt stood and crossed the small space between them in 2 strides. He stopped directly in front of Eli, close enough that Eli had to tilt his head back to meet his eyes. This close, Eli could see the gold flecks in Wyatt's irises, could smell the leather and smoke that clung to his skin. Liar, Wyatt said softly. You felt it when I held your hand in the barn, when Cole pressed against you, showing you how to work, when Kane touched your damaged palms and looked at you like he was trying to solve a puzzle. He leaned down, his lips brushing Eli's ear, as he whispered, and you're feeling it right now, aren't you? That pull, that heat, that terrifying awareness that something is happening between you and all 3 of us. Eli couldn't move, couldn't speak, could barely breathe. Wyatt was right. Everything he said was true, and the acknowledgement of it made Eli's entire body flush with heat and shame and something darker he didn't want to name. It's all right, Wyatt continued, his breath warm against Eli's skin. We feel it too, have since the moment we saw you walking up that road, all 3 of us, separately and together, drawn to something in you we can't quite explain. This is wrong, Eli managed, his voice shaken. I came here to work, to earn money, not to what? Wyatt pulled back just enough to look Eli in the eyes. Not to feel something, not to want something, not to discover that the 3 men who own this ranch are just as drawn to you as you are to them? I'm not. But the denial died on Eli's lips because it was a lie, and they both knew it. Wyatt's hand came up, rough fingertips tracing the line of Eli's jaw so gently it made him tremble. You can fight it if you want, but it won't change what's already started, what's already building between the 4 of us. His thumb brushed across Eli's lower lip, and Eli's breath hitched. And I think, deep down, you don't want to fight it at all. Before Eli could respond, Wyatt stepped back, the spell breaking. Get some sleep. Tomorrow Cole will be working with you, and he's not as patient as I am. He walked to his own bed and lay down, leaving Eli sitting there trembling and confused and terrifyingly aware of the truth in his words. Something had started today, something dangerous and forbidden and impossible to ignore. And as Eli finally lay down on his narrow bunk, staring at the ceiling while his body ached and his mind raced, he realized that he was already in far deeper than he'd ever intended. The ranch hand position had been the plan. But somewhere between arriving at the gate and lying here in the darkness, it had become something else entirely. 3 brothers, identical but different, all watching him with the same hunger, the same curiosity, the same impossible pull. And Eli, inexperienced and naive and desperately out of his depth, had no idea how to resist what they were silently offering, or if he even wanted to. Sleep came in fragments, broken by dreams that left Eli gasping and confused. In them, 3 pairs of hands touched him with reverence and possession. 3 voices murmured words he couldn't quite hear but felt in his bones. 3 bodies surrounded him, overwhelming and protective and terrifyingly intimate. When he finally woke to gray pre-dawn light filtering through the bunkhouse windows, his heart was racing and his skin felt feverish. The other ranch hands were already stirring, pulling on boots and heading out for morning chores. Eli forced himself upright, every muscle protesting, and dressed with fumbling fingers. His bandaged hands throbbed with each movement, a constant reminder of yesterday's work and the way Cain's rough fingers had tended to his wounds with unexpected gentleness. Outside, the air was cool and carried the scent of hay and livestock. Eli made his way toward the barn, unsure what his assignment would be today, but knowing instinctively that one of the brothers would find him. They seemed to have an unspoken rotation, each taking turns teaching him, testing him, pushing him further than he thought he could go. He found Cole, already in the barn, saddling horses with efficient movements. The quietest brother looked up when Eli entered, his dark eyes tracking every step. "You slept poorly," Cole observed. Not a question, a statement of fact. "How do you know?" "The shadows under your eyes. The way you're moving. Like you're still half in a dream." Cole gestured to the horse beside him. "Come here." Eli approached warily, unsure what to expect. Cole's intensity always made him feel exposed, like every thought and feeling was visible on his skin. When he reached the horse, Cole moved behind him without warning, his body pressing against Eli's back as it had yesterday. "You dream about us," Cole said quietly, his breath warm against Eli's ear. "Don't you?" Eli's throat went dry. "I don't lie. Not to me, not to yourself." Cole's hands came up, resting on Eli's shoulders. "Your body tells the truth, even when your mouth tries to hide it. The way you trembled when Wyatt held your hand. The way your breath caught when Cain touched you. The way you're shaken right now." "This isn't appropriate," Eli managed weakly. "Appropriate." Cole's hands tightened slightly. "What's appropriate about 3 brothers who can't stop thinking about the same person? What's appropriate about wanting someone so badly it makes you question everything you thought you knew about yourself?" Eli turned his head slightly, catching Cole's profile in his peripheral vision. "You're trying to confuse me." "No, I'm trying to make you see clearly." Cole's hand slid down Eli's arm, his touch deliberate and slow. "Wyatt talks in pretty words and Cain commands with authority, but I prefer honesty. So here's the truth. From the moment we saw you, all 3 of us knew. We felt it like lightning, like recognition, like something inevitable." "Knew what?" "That you were going to change everything. That we'd never be satisfied with just watching you work and keeping our distance. That we'd have to have you, one way or another." The words should have terrified Eli. Should have sent him running back to town, away from these 3 men who seemed determined to unravel every defense he'd ever built. Instead, they sent heat, pooling low in his stomach, made his pulse race with something that felt dangerously like anticipation. "I'm just a ranch hand," Eli whispered. "Nobody special." "You're wrong." Cole turned Eli to face him, his hands framing Eli's face with surprising gentleness. "You're someone who walked into our isolated world and made us remember what wanting feels like, what needing feels like, what it means to ache for something beyond work and routine and empty days." Eli stared up at him, lost in the intensity of Cole's gaze. "You're all so sure, but I don't know what I'm doing. Don't know how to—" "You don't have to know. That's what we're here for." Cole's thumb traced Eli's lower lip, the touch making Eli's breath hitch. "To teach you, to show you, to help you discover what you want and what you can handle. And what if I can't handle it? What if I'm not strong enough for whatever this is? Then we'll catch you when you fall. That's what this means, Eli. Not just wanting you, but protecting you, caring for you, making sure you're safe even when everything feels overwhelming." Before Eli could respond, footsteps approached. Cole stepped back smoothly, returning to his task of saddling the horse as though nothing had happened. Wyatt appeared in the doorway, his easy smile in place, but his eyes sharp as they took in the scene. "Mornin'," Wyatt drawled. "Kane wants Eli helping with the fence line today. Apparently there's a section that needs complete rebuilding." Cole nodded, his expression neutral. "He's all yours." But as Eli moved past him, Cole's hand caught his wrist briefly, squeezing once. A silent reminder of everything they'd just said, everything building between them. The fence line was far from the main ranch, requiring a ride that took nearly an hour. Kane rode ahead, his back straight and commanding, while Eli followed on the gentle mare they'd given him. The landscape stretched, endless around them, brown grass and red rock and sky so blue it hurt to look at. When they reached the damaged section, Kane dismounted and surveyed the work that needed doing. "This'll take most of the day. You ready for that?" "Yes, sir." "Stop calling me sir when we're alone." Kane's eyes found his. "Out here, it's just us. No need for formality." "What should I call you then?" "My name works fine." Kane handed him a pair of work gloves. "Put these on. Your hands need protection until they toughen up." Eli pulled on the gloves gratefully, already feeling the relief on his blistered palms. They worked in silence for a while, Kane showing him how to dig post holes, how to measure for proper spacing, how to secure the wire. The work was brutal under the climbing sun, but Eli threw himself into it, determined to prove he could handle whatever they threw at him. By midday, sweat soaked through his shirt and his muscles screamed in protest. Kane called a break, pulling out a canteen and dried meat from his saddlebag. They sat in the shade of a scraggly tree, the only shelter for miles. "You're pushing yourself too hard," Kane observed, watching Eli gulp water. "Isn't that what you want? To see how much I can take? We want to see your limits, not break you." Kane took the canteen back, his fingers brushing Eli's. "There's a difference." "Is there? Feels like you're all testing me constantly, seeing if I'll crack." Kane was quiet for a moment, his gaze distant. "Maybe we are, but not for the reasons you think." "Then why?" "Because we need to know if you're real, if what we're feeling is real or just desperation disguised as desire." Kane turned to look at him directly. "We've been alone out here for so long, Eli. Just the three of us, working this ranch, building something that matters but feeling like pieces of a puzzle that doesn't quite fit together." "And you think I'm the missing piece?" "I think you might be. But we need to know if you can handle this life, this isolation, this intensity. Need to know if you'll run when things get hard, or if you'll stay and fight for what we're building." Eli met his gaze steadily. "I've got nowhere else to go. Running isn't an option for me." "That's not the same as choosing to stay." "Maybe not, but it's a start." Something shifted in Kane's expression, a softening around his eyes. "You surprise me. Expected you to be more fragile, more easily broken. But there's steel under that soft exterior. Had to develop it. Life doesn't give you much choice sometimes." Kane reached out slowly, giving Eli time to pull away, and brushed a thumb across Eli's cheek, wiping away a streak of dust. The touch was gentle, almost reverent, and it made Eli's breath catch in his throat. "What happened to you?" Kane asked softly. "What made a city boy run to the middle of nowhere looking for ranch work?" Eli considered lying, considered keeping his past locked away where it couldn't hurt him. But something about Kane's steady gaze made him want to be honest, to share the truth he'd been carrying alone for so long. "My father was a gambler, a bad one. He borrowed from the wrong people, made promises he couldn't keep. When he died, the debts fell to me." Eli's voice was flat, reciting facts to keep the emotion at bay. "I tried to pay them working in town, but it wasn't enough. The men he owed started making threats, showing up at my boarding house, making it clear they'd take payment one way or another." Kane's jaw tightened. "So you ran?" "So I survived. Saw your advertisement for ranch help, wrote asking for a chance, and got on the first stagecoach heading this direction. Figured if I was far enough away, maybe they'd forget about me. And if they don't?" Eli met his eyes. "Then at least I had this, whatever this turns out to be." Kane's hand moved from Eli's cheek to the back of his neck, a gesture that was both possessive and comforting. "They won't find you here, and if they do, they'll have to go through all three of us to get to you." The fierce protectiveness in his voice made Eli's chest tighten. "You barely know me." I know enough. Know that you're brave and honest and stronger than you look. Know that you make my brothers smile in ways I haven't seen in years. Know that when I look at you, I feel something I thought was dead inside me." Kane's fingers tightened slightly. "That's enough to make you worth protecting." Eli couldn't find words to respond. Instead, he leaned slightly into Kane's touch, accepting the comfort and protection being offered. They sat like that for long moments, the vast emptiness of the prairie stretching around them, making them feel like the only two people in the world. "We should get back to work," Kane said eventually, though he didn't immediately pull away. "Still got half the fence line to rebuild." They worked through the afternoon, the physical labor giving Eli's churning thoughts something to focus on. But he was constantly aware of Kane beside him, the way they moved together with increasing synchronization, the way Kane's hands would steady him when he stumbled, the way their eyes met with increasing frequency. By the time they finished and started the ride back to the ranch, the sun was setting and Eli felt wrung out in every possible way. His body ached, his hands throbbed despite the gloves, and his mind spun with everything Kane had said, everything he'd admitted about his past. As the ranch buildings came into view, Kane slowed his horse to ride beside Eli. "Tonight, after dinner, meet me in the barn. There's something I want to show you." "What is it?" "A surprise." "But Eli," Kane's eyes found his in the fading light. "Come alone. This is just between us." The promise in those words sent shivers down Eli's spine. He nodded, not trusting his voice, and watched as Kane rode ahead toward the stables. Dinner was a raucous affair with all the ranch. Hands gathered around the long table, trading stories and jokes. Eli sat between two of the regular hands, grateful for the buffer between himself and the brothers who sat at the head of the table. He could feel their eyes on him constantly, could sense the weight of unspoken things hanging in the air. Wyatt caught his eye across the table and winked, a gesture that made heat creep up Eli's neck. Cole's gaze was more intense, more assessing, like he was measuring Eli's reactions to everything around him. And Kane watched with that commanding presence, occasionally asking questions or settling disputes, but always tracking Eli's movements. After dinner, as the hands dispersed to their evening routines, Eli slipped away toward the barn, his heart hammered with anticipation and nervousness, unsure what Kane wanted to show him, but knowing it would be significant. The barn was dim and quiet, illuminated only by a single lantern hanging from a post. Kane stood in the shadows near the back, his silhouette imposing against the darkness. "You came," Kane said, stepping into the light. "You asked me to." "I did, but you could have refused, could have decided this is all moving too fast, too intense." "Maybe it is," Eli admitted, "but I'm still here." Kane moved closer, each step deliberate. "Do you know why I wanted to see you alone? Why not wait until we were all together?" Eli shook his head, his mouth too dry to speak. "Because what my brothers and I feel for you is complicated. We're bound together, the three of us, in ways that most people wouldn't understand. We share everything, have since birth. Same face, same blood, same life." Kane stopped directly in front of Eli, so close their boots nearly touched. "But we're also individuals. We each want you for different reasons, in different ways. And I needed you to understand what I want specifically, before we all converge on you." "What do you want?" Eli whispered. Kane's hand came up, fingers threading through Eli's hair, tilting his head back to force eye contact. "I want to know if you can submit, not in weakness, but in trust. I want to know if you can put yourself in my hands and believe I'll take care of you." "I don't understand." "Yes, you do. You've felt it every time I've touched you, every time I've commanded you. That pull to let go, to stop fighting, to trust someone else to hold you together when you're falling apart." Kane's thumb traced Eli's jawline. "I want to be that person for you. Want you to let me lead, let me protect, let me show you what it means to be completely, utterly safe in someone's control." Eli's breath came in short gasps. "And your brothers. We'll each show you different things, teach you different lessons. Wyatt will make you laugh and challenge you to be bold. Cole will teach you patience and discipline. But me? Kane's voice dropped lower, more intimate. I'll teach you surrender. Not to me, but to yourself, to what you really want beneath all the fear and confusion. I'm terrified, Eli admitted. Good, you should be. What we're offering isn't safe or simple or easy. It will demand everything from you. But if you can trust us, if you can let us in completely, I promise you'll never feel alone again. Kane's forehead dropped to rest against Eli's, their breath mingling in the small space between them. They stood like that for endless moments, balanced on the knife's edge between restraint and surrender, between safety and risk. I want to try, Eli finally whispered. I don't know if I can do what you're asking, but I want to try. Kane's hand tightened in his hair, not painfully, but possessively. That's all I need to hear, that you're willing. Everything else we'll figure out together. He pressed his lips to Eli's forehead, a gesture that felt like both blessing and claiming. Then he released him, stepping back to put necessary distance between them. Go back to the bunkhouse, sleep if you can. Tomorrow Cole has plans for you. Kane's smile was slight but genuine. And Eli, thank you for trusting me enough to come here tonight. For listening. For not running. Eli nodded, not trusting himself to speak. He turned and walked out of the barn on shaking legs, feeling Kane's eyes on him the whole way. Back in the bunkhouse, the other hands were already asleep or settling in for the night. Eli lay down on his bunk, staring at the ceiling, replaying every word Kane had said. Submit. Trust. Surrender. Words that should have scared him, but instead made his pulse race with something dangerously close to desire. 3 brothers, each wanting different things from him, each offering different forms of connection, of intimacy, of belonging. And somehow, impossibly, Eli wanted to give them everything they asked for. He was in so far over his head that drowning seemed inevitable. But maybe, just maybe, that was exactly where he needed to be. Dawn came too early and too bright. Eli woke to rough hands shaking his shoulder, his body protesting every movement. Cole stood over him, already dressed and alert, while the other ranch hands filed out of the bunkhouse into the gray pre-dawn light. Up, Cole said simply. You're with me today. Eli forced himself upright, biting back a groan as his abused muscles screamed. His hands throbbed beneath the bandages, and every part of him felt like it had been trampled by horses. But he stood, dressed quickly, and followed Cole outside. The morning air was cool and crisp, carrying the scent of dew and livestock. Cole led him toward the horse corrals where several animals milled about, their breath creating small clouds in the chill. You said you've never really worked horses, Cole stated, not bothering with pleasantries. No, sir. Just ridden a few times in town. Then today you learn. Cole vaulted the fence with easy grace and approached a large bay gelding. The horse snorted and sidestepped, but Cole's hands moved, with calm confidence, settling on the animal's neck, speaking in low tones too quiet for Eli to hear. Within moments, the horse stilled, leaning into Cole's touch like a cat seeking affection. It was mesmerizing to watch, the way Cole commanded trust without force, how his stillness became a language the animal understood. Come here, Cole ordered, not looking at Eli. Eli climbed the fence clumsily and approached, his heart racing. The horse was massive up close, all muscle and barely contained energy. Cole reached out without warning and grabbed Eli's wrist, pulling him close enough that Eli stumbled against his side. Feel this, Cole said, pressing Eli's palm flat against the horse's neck. Beneath Eli's hand, he could feel the animal's pulse, strong and steady. That's trust. That's communication. You want to work with horses, you need to learn their language. Cole's hand remained over Eli's, holding it in place, and Eli was acutely aware of how their bodies aligned, how Cole's chest pressed against his shoulder, how the heat from his skin seemed to burn through their clothes. What's their language? Eli asked, his voice embarrassingly breathless. Stillness, patience, certainty. Cole's voice rumbled through both of them. Horses sense fear, hesitation, doubt. You need to be solid as stone, unshakable. Can you do that? Eli tried to steady his breathing, tried to quiet the racing of his heart that had nothing to do with the horse and everything to do with the man pressed against him. I'll try. Trying isn't enough. Either you are or you aren't. Cole's hand tightened over his. Show me what you're made of, city boy. The challenge hung in the air between them. Cole released Eli's hand and stepped back, leaving him alone with the horse. The gelding turned its large head, dark eyes examining Eli, with what felt like judgment. Eli took a slow breath and did what Cole had done, moving with deliberate calm, placing his hand on the horse's neck and letting his own stillness speak. The horse shifted, but didn't bolt. Eli continued the gentle pressure, the quiet presence, and slowly, impossibly, the animal leaned into his touch. Good, Cole said from behind him, and the single word of approval sent warmth flooding through Eli's chest. Now saddle him. The task was harder than it looked. The saddle was heavy, the horse tall, and Eli's damaged hands made every movement agony. But he refused to quit, refused to ask for help. He wrestled with the leather and buckles, ignoring the sweat that dripped down his back despite the cool morning. Cole watched in silence, never offering assistance, never showing impatience, just that same intense focus that made Eli feel simultaneously exposed and protected. When Eli finally finished, Cole circled the horse, checking the work with critical eyes. He adjusted one strap, tightened another, then nodded. Not terrible. Mount up. Eli stared at the stirrup that seemed impossibly high. His body was already exhausted, his hands screaming in protest. But Cole was watching, waiting, testing. Eli grabbed the saddle horn and somehow managed to haul himself up, settling into the seat with a distinct lack of grace. Cole swung up behind him without warning, his powerful body suddenly bracketing Eli's, his arms reaching around to take the reins. You need to learn control before you ride alone. Pay attention. Eli couldn't pay attention to anything except the solid wall of muscle pressed against his back, the heat radiating through their clothes, the way Cole's arms caged him in. His hands covered Eli's on the reins, teaching him the subtle pressures and releases that communicated with the horse. Feel how he responds? Cole murmured against Eli's ear, his breath warm. How a gentle touch gets more than force ever could. Eli managed a nod, not trusting his voice. They rode like that for what felt like hours, Cole's body moving with the horse's rhythm, teaching Eli through touch and proximity and whispered instruction. By the time they returned to the corral, Eli was dizzy with more than exhaustion. Cole dismounted first, then reached up to help Eli down. His hands bracketed Eli's waist, lifting him effortlessly from the saddle. But instead of releasing him immediately, Cole held him suspended for a moment, their faces inches apart. You did better than expected, Cole said quietly, but you're trembling. Sore, Eli managed, though it wasn't entirely a lie. Sore, Cole's eyes searched his face, seeing too much. Is that all? Eli couldn't answer. The truth was too complicated, too dangerous to voice. He was trembling because of exhaustion, yes, but also because of the way Cole's hands felt on his waist, because of the heat in those dark eyes. Because something inside him was responding to Cole's proximity in ways he didn't understand and couldn't control. Cole lowered him slowly to the ground, but didn't release him immediately. You feel it, don't you? What Wyatt told you last night? I don't. Don't lie to me. Cole's grip tightened slightly. I can feel your pulse racing. See the way your breath catches. You're drawn to this, to us, even though you know you shouldn't be. This is wrong, Eli whispered. Maybe, but that doesn't make it any less real. Cole finally released him, stepping back with visible effort. Go find Kane, he has your next assignment. And Eli, he waited until Eli looked at him. Stop fighting what you feel. It only makes it worse. Eli found Kane in the equipment shed, sharpening tools with methodical precision. The rasp of metal on stone filled the small space, rhythmic and almost hypnotic. Kane looked up when Eli entered, his eyes traveling over him with that same assessing gaze. Cole, work you hard? Yes, sir. Good. You're learning. Kane set down the tool he was sharpening and gestured to a pile of leather tack that needed repair. Sit. You're going to learn basic leather work. Eli sat on the low bench, and Kane settled beside him, close enough that their thighs touched. He picked up a bridle with a broken strap and demonstrated the stitching technique, his large hands moving with surprising delicacy. Your turn, Cain said, handing Eli a different piece and the tools. Eli's bandaged hands fumbled with the leather awl, his movements clumsy compared to Cain's practiced ease. After watching him struggle for a few minutes, Cain moved behind him, his chest against Eli's back, his arms coming around to guide Eli's hands. Like this, Cain murmured, his deep voice resonating through both their bodies. Steady pressure, consistent angle. Don't force it. Let the tool do the work. It was the same position Cole had used on horseback, but Cain's presence felt different. Where Cole had been intense and controlled, Cain radiated a coiled power, like a spring wound too tight. Eli could feel the tension in Cain's muscles, sense the restraint it took for him to maintain this careful proximity without crossing some invisible line. "Why are you all doing this?" Eli asked suddenly, surprising himself. Cain's hands stilled over his. "Doing what?" "Teaching me. Being patient. Finding reasons to—" Eli trailed off, not sure how to finish. "To touch you?" Cain finished for him, his voice dropping lower. "To be close to you? To test whether what we're all feeling is madness or something else?" Eli's breath caught. "Yes." Cain was quiet for a long moment, his hands still covering Eli's on the leather. "Because from the moment we saw you walking up to this ranch, something shifted. All three of us felt it, separately and together. Like recognizing something we'd been missing without knowing we'd lost it. That doesn't make sense." "No, it doesn't." Cain's thumb traced small circles on the back of Eli's hand, a gesture that felt both soothing and incendiary. "But sense isn't always part of wanting, is it?" "I came here for work," Eli said weakly. "Not for this. And yet here we are." Cain's breath was warm against Eli's neck. Three brothers who've built their life around this ranch, around each other, never needing or wanting anything else. And then you arrive, young and inexperienced and honest, and suddenly we're all circling you like you're water in a drought. "You're brothers," Eli protested. "You can't all want the same person? Can't all be drawn to someone who seems to see each of us differently, who brings out different parts of who we are?" Cain's arms tightened slightly around him. "We've shared everything our whole lives, Eli. Why should this be different?" The implications of his words made Eli's head spin. "This is insane." "Probably." Cain pulled back, releasing him, and the loss of contact felt like a punishment. "But you're still here, still learning, still letting us get close despite knowing something's happening between us." Eli turned to face him, needing to see Cain's expression. "What happens when I finish learning, when I'm a proper ranch hand?" Cain's eyes were dark and unreadable. "Then you decide what you want. Whether you want to keep your distance, do your work, and pretend there's nothing more, or whether you want to explore what the four of us could be together." "I don't even know what that means." "Neither do we." Cain stood, putting necessary distance between them. "But we have time to figure it out. The ranch is isolated. What happens here stays here. No one needs to know what we build in the spaces between work and sleep." He left before Eli could respond, disappearing into the bright afternoon sunlight. Eli sat alone in the equipment shed, his hands shaking, his mind reeling with the enormity of what Cain had suggested. Three brothers, all wanting him. Together. It was impossible, forbidden, wrong in every way that mattered. And yet the pull he felt toward each of them was undeniable. The way his body responded to their proximity, the way his heart raced when they looked at him with hunger and curiosity and something deeper he couldn't name. That evening, as the sun painted the sky in shades of amber and crimson, Eli stood at the fence watching the cattle graze. His body ached in new ways, his hands throbbed despite the medicine, and his mind churned with confusion and forbidden desire. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Wyatt's voice came from behind him, making Eli jump. The middle brother had approached silently, now leaning against the fence beside him with easy grace. "The sunset, I mean. Though I suppose you're beautiful too, in your own way." Eli flushed. "I'm covered in dust and sweat, and I smell like horses." "Like I said, beautiful." Wyatt's smile was wicked. "You survived your second day, starting to think you might actually make it here. Is that doubt or hope in your voice?" "Both, and doubt because you're so obviously out of your element. Hope because—" Wyatt's hand came up, fingers barely brushing Eli's jaw. "Because if you stay, we get to keep exploring this thing between us. Kane told you about our conversation. We tell each other everything, always have." Wyatt's touch became slightly firmer, turning Eli's face toward him. "Does that bother you? That we share?" "I don't know what bothers me anymore," Eli admitted. "Everything about this is confusing." "Then let me make it simple." Wyatt stepped closer, his body nearly touching Eli's. "We want you, all three of us, in ways that probably aren't entirely proper or expected. And unless I'm completely misreading things, you want us too." "It's not that simple." "Why not? Because society says three men shouldn't share desire for a fourth? Because you think wanting more than one person makes you wrong somehow?" Wyatt's free hand came up, bracketing Eli's face between both palms. "Out here, we make our own rules, build our own world, and in our world, if four people want each other, if they're drawn together by something, none of them can explain. There's nothing wrong with exploring it. People would say, people aren't here, just us, just this ranch, this sunset, this moment." Wyatt's forehead dropped to rest against Eli's, their breath mingling in the small space between them. "Stop thinking about what the world says and start feeling what your body knows." Eli's eyes fluttered closed, overwhelmed by Wyatt's proximity, by the heat radiating between them, by the ache of wanting something he'd never imagined he could have. "I'm scared." "Good. Fear means it matters, means you're not taking this lightly." Wyatt's thumbs traced Eli's cheekbones with devastating gentleness. "We're scared too. Never felt anything like this. Never wanted anyone the way we want you. It terrifies us because we don't know how to control it, how to keep it from consuming everything. Then maybe we shouldn't. Maybe we shouldn't." Wyatt pulled back just enough to look Eli in the eyes. "Or maybe we should stop fighting and see where this leads. Take it slow, figure it out together. Build something none of us expected, but all of us need." Before Eli could respond, footsteps approached. Cole and Kane emerged from the barn, moving toward them with identical purposeful strides. They stopped a few feet away, forming a loose triangle around Eli, all three brothers watching him with varying degrees of intensity and hunger. "Wyatt making speeches again?" Cole asked, a hint of amusement in his tone. "Someone has to," Wyatt replied, not moving away from Eli. "You two just brood and stare." "We communicate just fine," Kane said, his eyes never leaving Eli's face. "The question is whether our city boy is ready to hear what we're all trying to say." Eli looked between the three of them, his heart hammering. They were all so different despite their identical features. Wyatt with his easy charm and wicked humor, Cole with his intense focus and careful control, Kane with his commanding presence and barely leashed power. And somehow, impossibly, he was drawn to all three in different ways, for different reasons. "I hear you," Eli said finally, his voice shaking but clear. "I just don't know what to do with what I'm hearing." "You don't have to do anything tonight," Kane said, his voice gentler than usual. "We're not rushing you, not forcing you to decide anything you're not ready for. But we are being honest," Cole added, "about what we want, what we feel. And we need you to be honest too, even if that honesty is just admitting you're confused." "I am confused," Eli admitted. "I've never felt anything like this. Never imagined I could feel pulled to three people at once. Never thought I'd be standing here wanting all of you in ways I don't even fully understand." Wyatt's hand squeezed his shoulder gently. "That's a start. Honesty is where trust begins." "And trust is what we need," Kane said, stepping closer. "If this is going to be anything more than just attraction, if we're going to build something real, we need to trust each other completely." "Even when it's scary?" Eli asked. "Especially then," Cole answered. They stood like that as darkness fell around them, four figures silhouetted against the dying light. No one moved closer, no one pushed for more. They just existed in that charged space between wanting and having, between possibility and reality. Finally, Kane broke the spell. "It's late. Eli needs rest, and we all have work tomorrow." The brothers dispersed, each touching Eli briefly as they passed. Wyatt's fingers trailed down his arm. Cole's hand squeezed his shoulder. Kane's palm pressed briefly against his chest, feeling his racing heartbeat. Then Eli was alone in the gathering darkness, trembling and confused, and more alive than he'd felt in his entire life. The days began to blur together, each one bringing new lessons and new tensions. Eli learned to rope cattle under Wyatt's patient instruction, their bodies pressed close as Wyatt showed him the proper wrist motion. He learned to shoe horses with Cole guiding his hands, the intimacy of the work creating stolen moments of contact. He learned to read weather patterns and manage supplies with Kane, their shoulders brushing as they worked side by side. And every night the brothers found him, sometimes separately, sometimes together, pushing boundaries just slightly further each time. A hand on his waist that lingered too long, lips brushing his temple in a gesture that transcended fraternal comfort, bodies pressing close under the guise of instruction, of protection, of simple proximity. The other ranch hands noticed something but couldn't quite name it. They saw how the Blackwood brothers orbited Eli, how they protected him without being obvious, how their eyes tracked him constantly. But the brothers were careful, never crossing lines in public, never showing more than appropriate concern for a green hand learning the ropes. A week passed, then two. Eli's hands healed, calluses forming where soft skin had been. His body adapted to the brutal work, muscles developing, endurance building. He was transforming from city boy to ranch hand, just as they'd predicted. But the transformation went deeper than physical. He was also becoming someone who could accept the impossible, who could look at three identical brothers and see three completely different men, who could want all of them without shame or apology. The breaking point came on a Saturday night. The other hands had ridden into town for their weekly drinking and carousing, leaving the ranch quiet and empty. Eli had stayed behind, too exhausted to make the long ride, and found himself alone with the brothers. They gathered in the main house, the four of them around the large wooden table. No pretense of work this time, no excuse for proximity. Just four people who'd been circling each other for weeks, finally allowing themselves to occupy the same space without barriers. "We need to talk," Kane said, his voice carrying that commander's tone that brooked no argument. "About what happens next." Eli's heart raced. "What do you mean?" "You've been here 3 weeks, Wyatt said, leaning back in his chair with deceptive casualness. "You've proven yourself as a hand. You've earned your place. The question now is what kind of place you want." "Just work and wages?" Cole added, his eyes intense. "Or something more?" Eli looked between them, seeing the same hunger in all three faces, the same barely restrained need. "You're asking me to choose?" "No," Kane said firmly. "We're asking if you want to stop pretending there's a choice to make. Stop acting like what's building between us isn't real." "It is real," Eli admitted, his voice shaking. "Terrifyingly real. But I don't know how this works. How four people can what? Want each other?" Wyatt leaned forward. "Care for each other? Build something together that the world won't understand but doesn't have to?" "We're not asking you to understand it all tonight," Cole said. "Just asking if you want to try, if you want to explore this with us, see where it leads." Eli's hands clenched on the table. Every instinct said this was madness, that nothing good could come from wanting three men who were bound together by blood and history. But every part of his heart, every beat of his pulse, said something different. "I'm scared," he confessed. "So are we," Kane admitted, and the vulnerability in his voice was devastating. "Never done this before, never wanted anyone the way we want you. Don't know if we'll do it right, if we'll hurt you, if we'll destroy what we're trying to build. But we want to try," Wyatt added. "Want to see if what we feel can become something lasting, something real." "What exactly are you proposing?" Eli asked, needing clarity. The brothers exchanged looks, that silent communication passing between them again. Then Kane spoke, his words careful and deliberate. "We share everything, the ranch, the work, our lives. We're proposing that we share you too, if you're willing. Not as something to be divided or fought over, but as someone we all care for, all want, all need in different ways." "You'd be ours," Cole said quietly. "All of ours, together. And we'd be yours," Wyatt finished. All three of us, completely. The weight of their words settled over Eli like a physical thing. They weren't proposing something casual or temporary. They were offering him a place in their lives, in their bond, in whatever strange and beautiful thing the four of them could create together. People would call it wrong, Eli said softly. People call lots of things wrong that aren't, Cain replied. Love between men, desire that doesn't fit neat boxes, connections that transcend what society deems acceptable. Is that what this is? Eli's eyes traveled between them. Love? Too soon to call it that, Wyatt said honestly, but it's something powerful and real and worth exploring. Eli closed his eyes, taking a shaky breath. When he opened them, he found all three brothers watching him with a mixture of hope and fear, waiting for his answer, prepared to accept whatever he decided. I want to try, Eli said finally, the words feeling like stepping off a cliff. I don't know how this works, don't know if we can make it work, but I want to try. The relief on their faces was palpable. Cain reached across the table first, his large hand covering Eli's. Then Cole's hand joined his, then Wyatt's. 4 hands stacked together, a physical representation of what they were choosing. We go slow, Cain said. Figure it out together. No pressure, no expectations beyond honesty and trust. And if it doesn't work? Eli asked. Then at least we tried, Cole answered. At least we didn't let fear stop us from exploring something extraordinary. Wyatt stood and moved around the table, pulling Eli up into an embrace that felt like coming home. Cole joined them, his solid presence grounding. Then Cain, his arms wrapping around all three, creating a cocoon of warmth and safety. They stood like that for a long time, 4 bodies fitting together like pieces of a puzzle none of them had known was incomplete. No words needed, just the steady rhythm of shared breathing, shared warmth, shared possibility. When they finally pulled apart, something fundamental had shifted. The air felt different, charged with potential and promise. They were no longer foreman and brothers and Green Ranch hand. They were something new, something undefined, something that would have to be built moment by moment, touch by touch, choice by choice. Stay in the house tonight, Cain said softly. No more pretending, no more distance. Eli nodded, knowing what he was agreeing to, knowing that crossing this threshold meant there was no going back to simple ranch hand and employers. They were entering new territory, unmapped and dangerous and thrilling. The brothers led him upstairs to a large room that clearly belonged to all three of them. One massive bed dominated the space, big enough for multiple people, testament to how closely they'd always lived. Eli's heart hammered as he took in the implications. We won't push, Wyatt said, reading his nervousness. Tonight is just about being close, about not hiding anymore. They undressed down to simple sleeping clothes, the act somehow both mundane and intimate. Then they settled into the bed together, Eli finding himself bracketed between warm bodies, held and protected and desired. Cain's arm wrapped around his waist from behind. Cole's hand found his, threading their fingers together. Wyatt's forehead pressed against his, breath mingling in the darkness. Sleep, Cain murmured against the back of his neck. Tomorrow we figure out the rest. But Eli couldn't sleep. His body was too aware, too alive with sensation. Every point of contact burned. Every breath they took seemed coordinated with his own. He was drowning in the presence of these 3 men, in the impossible reality of what they were choosing to build. I can hear you thinking, Wyatt whispered. Too loud in that head of yours. Can't help it, Eli admitted. This is overwhelming, Cole finished. We know. We feel it too. But also right, Cain added, his voice a rumble against Eli's spine. Doesn't it feel right? The 4 of us like this? It did. That was the terrifying part. Despite the strangeness, despite the impossibility, being held between these 3 men felt more right than anything Eli had ever experienced, like finding a home he hadn't known he'd been searching for. Yes, Eli breathed. It feels right. Then that's enough for now, Wyatt said, his hand coming up to cup Eli's face. We'll figure out the rest tomorrow, and the day after, and all the days that follow. Gradually, impossibly, Eli's racing thoughts quieted. The warmth and security of being held by all three brothers seeped into his bones, and exhaustion finally claimed him. He drifted off, surrounded by heartbeats that weren't his own, breathing in sync with three men who'd somehow become essential to his existence. The weeks that followed were a careful dance of discovery. During the day, they maintained propriety around the other ranch hands, though the brothers no longer bothered hiding their protectiveness toward Eli. At night, they retreated to the main house, to that large bed where they learned each other's rhythms, boundaries, desires. It wasn't always easy. Learning to navigate 4 different personalities, 4 different needs, 4 different ways of expressing care and want proved challenging. There were moments of jealousy when one brother monopolized Eli's time, moments of confusion about how to balance individual connections with the group dynamic, moments of doubt about whether what they were building could last. But there were also moments of perfect synchronicity, times when all 4 of them would work together, moving as one unit. Evenings spent on the porch, Eli surrounded by the brothers as they watched the sun set. Nights when they'd talk for hours, sharing histories and dreams and fears. Slowly, what had started as attraction and curiosity deepened into something more profound. They learned that Eli calmed Cain's intensity, making him laugh in ways his brothers rarely managed. That he challenged Cole's perfectionism, encouraging spontaneity. That he grounded Wyatt's restlessness, giving him something steady to orbit around. And the brothers gave Eli what he'd been missing since his father died. Family. Not the family of blood, but the family you choose. The family you build through shared struggles and trust and unwavering support. 3 months after Eli had walked up that dusty road with nothing but hope, he stood at the same fence where he'd first watched the sunset with Wyatt. But now, he wasn't alone. Cain stood at his right, solid and protective. Cole at his left, quiet and grounding. Wyatt behind him, arms wrapped loosely around his waist, chin resting on his shoulder. "You ever regret it?" Wyatt murmured against his ear. "Choosing this? Choosing us?" Eli thought about it honestly. Thought about the complicated nature of their relationship, about the secrecy it required, about the judgment they'd face if the world knew the truth. "No," he said finally, meaning it completely. "Never." "Even when it's hard?" Cole asked. "Especially then. The hard parts mean it matters, mean it's real." Cain's hand found his, squeezing gently. "You've changed everything, you know. We thought we were complete, the 3 of us. Thought we didn't need anything more. But you showed us what we'd been missing." "What's that?" Eli asked. "Balance," Cain said. "The 3 of us together were too much of the same thing, too isolated, too closed off. You opened us up, made us better. Made us whole," Wyatt added, his arms tightening. "Made us a family," Cole finished. Tears pricked Eli's eyes. He'd come here desperate and alone, expecting nothing more than a paycheck and a place to sleep. Instead, he'd found 3 men who saw him, wanted him, chose him every single day. "I love you," Eli said quietly, the words feeling both terrifying and necessary. "All 3 of you. I don't know if that's how it's supposed to work, but I do." The brothers went still around him. Then Cain turned him gently, his large hands cupping Eli's face. "We love you too. All of us, completely." "Should have said it sooner," Wyatt admitted, moving to stand beside them. "Been feeling it for weeks," Cole added, joining the circle they created. They held each other as the sun painted the sky in shades of gold and crimson, 4 silhouettes against the fading light. To anyone watching from a distance, they might have looked like nothing more than ranch owner and hands sharing a moment of camaraderie. But they were so much more. They were a family forged in the harsh wilderness of desire and trust. They were 4 men who'd found each other against all odds and decided that societal expectations mattered less than the truth beating in their connected hearts. The ranch would continue its rhythms. Cattle would need tending, horses would need breaking, fences would need mending, and through it all, 4 men would work side by side, building not just a successful ranch, but a life together. It wouldn't always be easy. The world wouldn't understand or approve. They'd face challenges that threatened to tear them apart, would have to constantly choose each other over easier paths. But standing there surrounded by the three men who'd become his entire world, Eli knew one thing with absolute certainty. Whatever came next, they would face it together. 4 hearts beating as one, 4 lives intertwined, 4 souls who'd found their home in each other. The virgin barn boy who'd arrived 3 months ago no longer existed. In his place stood a man who'd been remade by the brutal honesty of the frontier, by the patient teaching of 3 identical brothers, by the impossible love they'd all chosen to build despite the world's judgment. And as night fell over the Blackwood Ranch, as the 4 of them finally turned toward the house and the life waiting inside, Eli smiled, because he'd learned the most important lesson of all. Home wasn't a place. It was the people who chose to love you, flaws and all, in whatever form that love took. He'd found his home, and he was never letting go.